Okay, we saw in chapter 13 two beasts, one from the sea, which is basically the sea of nations, one from the earth. Not exactly sure what that means, but he's going to have two horns, so he's going to be coming from two different parts of the earth. Usually, when you come out of the sea, you have power over all the nations, and the two horns, they have individual power over different parts of the earth. So maybe that's what the difference is. But we get to chapter 14, and this is part of the same story. This is all part of the fourth story. In verse 1, and I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Sion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne, and before the four beasts and the elders, and no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. So now we have these 144,000. They were sealed in the second story. We saw that in chapter 7. They got the Holy Spirit. Now we see they have been raised up in heaven. That's where they're at here. The voice of many waters, that's the voice of Jesus. We learned that from chapter 1. And now these harpers are the 144,000 singing their new song. So they're in heaven now singing their new song. So that 30 minutes going from earth to heaven, that's over. So the silence, that 30 minutes of silence is over. So again, when Jesus rose, the people were up there. They were standing on the Mount of Olives looking up into heaven, and angels said, how long are you going to stand here looking? Jesus is going to come back the same way he came down. When people talk about the rapture, they seem to think that the rapture is going to be at the blink of an eye. That's the change that's going to occur. So you go from mortal to immortal. If you're alive when Jesus comes, that change happens in the blink of an eye. It's going to take us a little while to get up on into heaven, and people are going to be able to see you. So there's no vanishing act that's going to happen. So the bodies of the dead are raised. We're going to see the bodies of the dead go up. But these were alive. So these were dead. They were raised back to life, and they go up into heaven just like Jesus did. For review, this was the sign of the Son of Man that was in Matthew 24:30. So we learned a little bit about these 144,000. So they're virgins. So these had to come to Christ before the Roman Empire could come up. So I said there's like 30,000 Christians, Jewish Christians in Israel now. This limits them a little bit more. So we learned they're men from each of the tribes. Now we cut it back a little bit more. They're probably young men because they're virgins. Who knows? There might be 100,000 Christians in Israel about 1 million Christians before we get 144,000 of these young men. But they're never going to be separated from Jesus again. And they are first fruits. So if you picture a harvest, which is the end of the age. That's what the resurrection and rapture is all about. It's pictured as a harvest where God separates the wheat from the tares. So the wheat is God's people. He puts them in their barn. The tares are burned up. So the tares will be staying on earth getting burned up. We'll see that in Jerusalem, we're going to have all the world's armies going to be gathered together to fight against God. Those are the tares. So those are the ones that are going to be burned up. But God's going to gather his people from all over the earth. And that's the wheat. So these are the first fruits of that harvest. That means they're the first ones that have died and risen into heaven. Well, we've only got the two witnesses. They died and rose into heaven. So you can't have two groups of the first fruits. So the two witnesses are the 144,000 by virtue of this resurrection. And that's why they're before the throne of God. To that.